In this next demo, we will look at creating shards. So we're going to take the existing Toy Store database and we're going to implement sharding to improve the application performance. We will look to shard the sales.customers and sales.orders table into two shards. Toy Store _1 _100 with values of customer IDs from 1 to 100, and Toy Store 200 with values for customer ID from 100 to 200. So we're going to implement sharding with the aim of improving performance. Now, in order to complete this, there are a number of steps involved. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to download and get the Elastic DB tool scripts. We will provision the shard map manager database called Toy Store _SMM. We'll rename the Toy Store database to Toy Store _shard 1 _100. We'll provision the Toy Store _shard 200 Azure SQL database. We'll promote the shard map manager, Toy Store _SMM, to be the shard map manager, and this will create the shard management tables and the procedures in that database. We'll create a arrange shard map in the shared map manager database. We'll add the shards to the map manager. We will add the sharded table and reference table schema to the shard map manager database, and we'll verify the sharding by reviewing the shard map manager tables. The Elastic DB tool scripts are a set of PowerShell modules and scripts provided by Microsoft to allow you to easily create and manage Azure SQL database shards. They use functions exposed by the Elastic Database Client Library to provide helper PowerShell commandlets to easily create and manage shards. Now you can download the tools from the Microsoft website, but they are also available in the code folder Lesson 6 Elastic DB tool scripts. Okay, you can see in here we've got a range of PowerShell scripts. If I go into shard management here, you can see there's a shard management PowerShell script. So I'm just going to edit that. And when the PowerShell ISE loads up, we will be able to see this script. Now, shard management.psm1 contains functions such as new shard map manager, get shard map manager, new range shard map manager, and add -shard. Each function has a synopsis section that briefly explains the purpose. So you can see there, provide a set of methods to interact with Elastic Shard Management functionality, and then as we scroll down, we've got Shard Map Manager enables us to add and modify shard entries. So that's the new shard manager. And then we can go down, get shard manager. Shard manager enables one to add, modify, delete entries and ranges. So you get the gist. I'm going to save my Azure profile details to a file. This will enable me to log into my Azure account from PowerShell using this save profile. Otherwise, I'll need to keep providing my Azure credentials in an authentication dialog box every time I run an Azure command in PowerShell. So this isn't part of the sharding process, but it will save time by not having to keep typing in the credentials into PowerShell every time we run an Azure command. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to open up the PowerShell Integrated Solutions environment. And then I'm going to type in here, I'm going to type in add -Azure RM account, and I'm going to execute. Now, that is going to open up a dialog box, which unfortunately doesn't let me expand it, which is a bit of a shame. But I just need to put in my email address. Click Next. And we've returned to the PowerShell window, so we've logged in successfully. And the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to save my Azure RM profile. I'm going to specify the path as being, I'm going to put it in lesson 6 here, right at the top. So C code lesson 6. If I drop back onto my PowerShell, I'm going to save it there. Don't need that hyphen. Highlight and just run my selection. Access denied. Shame. And the reason it failed is because my path wasn't exactly correct. I didn't actually specify a file name. So I'm going to call my file my Azure profile. There's a JSON file. So I'm going to highlight and see if this works. There we go. And if I go down to my Explorer, go into lesson 6, we can see we've got my Azure profile saved. Next, we're going to use the sharding PowerShell script to shard our database. Now, the first part of this script defines some parameters. There's 7 in total. We have got the resource group. This is the Azure resource group that contains the Azure SQL Server and the database. Okay, and this is going to be the same resource group we've been using all along. SQL Server. This is the logical Azure SQL Server name that hosts the ToyStore database. We will be asked to specify a username and a password. We have a Shard Map Manager database. This is the name of the Shard Map Manager database. And I'll have a prefix of _SMM against the ToyStore database to name the Shard Map Manager database. The database to shard, the database we're going to be sharding, so it's going to be ToyStore in this example. And then we've got our Azure profile file path. So that's a JSON file we've just created that contains our Azure profile details. The highlighted section of the script you can see there will log us into our Azure account and then set the appropriate context. So it'll log the script execution to the sharding docs text file in our code folder in lesson 6. It'll set the Azure profile file path parameter to be that of the file that we created just now. It'll then log into the Azure account using that profile. If it's not a valid path, then it uses the login Azure RM account command, and then you will have to provide a subscription name and a password in pop-up windows. It'll set the default Azure profile to your profile using set RM context commandlet, and this is going to tell PowerShell to create and manage objects in your Azure profile. Then we will import the shared management module. And we need to make sure here the file path is correct. It's relative to the directory from where you're executing this script from. So we need to make sure that the DB tools script folder is available in the lesson 6 sharding folder. Then we'll set the fully qualified name of our Azure SQL Server, passing in the parameter that we have set. So it'll be the SQL Server name .database.windows.net. And this will be required later in the script. Then we'll provision a new Azure SQL database by calling the provision Azure SQL database PowerShell script. And we created that back in lesson 1. And that's going to act as our shard manager. Then we're going to establish credentials for the Azure SQL database server. We're going to create a connection context. We're going to get the Azure SQL database context. We're going to rename the existing database and give it an _shard1 prefix. We're going to create a second shard. And then we're going to create tables to be sharded, and that can be found in the table scripts folder in lesson 6. So the highlighted script declares two variables, shard1 and shard2. If the value of the database to shard variable is toystore, then shard1 is going to be equal to toystore underscore shard underscore 1 underscore 100, and shard2 will be equal to toystore underscore shard underscore 200. It's going to rename the existing toystore database to shard1, that is toystore underscore shard underscore 1 underscore 100. The set as your SQL database commandlet is used to rename the database. We then provision the shard2 database called toystore shard underscore 2, and it uses the provision as your SQL database PowerShell script that we described in a previous step to provision a new database. It's going to create the necessary tables called sales.customer and sales.order and application.countries in the newly provisioned shard2 database. The create script for these tables are in the lesson 6 sharding table scripts folder. The get child item commandlet will get all of the files present in that directory, and then we're going to invoke the SQL commandlet to execute the script on the shard2 database.